This is a presentation on the literacy strategy known as found poetry. If you're not familiar with what found poetry is a literacy strategy where students write poetry that is created by using words or phrases that a student finds in other source material. So to make a found poem, a student does not actually write anything of their own typically. Typically all of the text, the words, the phrases, whatever, in their final found poem come from other sources that they have read. As you can see there, they only use text that they have found in source material. Now, why would you use such a strategy? This is an excellent literacy strategy to help students after a text has been read, when you are using different strategies to help students summarize, understand, make sense of a text, and most importantly, to demonstrate their own knowledge of the text. So as you can see, there can be used to help students demonstrate their understanding by allowing them to review the material, to summarize text, or to synthesize ideas across several texts. You can actually use this literacy strategy with one text, or you can have 2 or 3 different things that students are reading, and then you can have them create a found poem using words and phrases and ideas from all of the different texts and kind of synthesizing the different ideas to bring them together. So to make a found poem, it's actually a relatively simple process that most students should be able to pick up on pretty quickly. The first thing you have to do is you have to have a source material. It could be one thing, it could be several things. It could be letters, it could be speeches, it could be articles from magazines or journals, it could be a page from a textbook, whatever you are trying to get students to read. And the first thing a student has to do is to read that text or those texts. And specifically, not just read, but understand. Found poems don't work if the student doesn't grasp the meaning of what it is that they're reading. So the students need to read and understand the author's meaning and the important information from the text. Once the student reads and understands, then their job is to choose a focus. Now, as far as choosing a focus, this can be something that the student themselves chooses. It could be something that you assign. It could be, look for the main idea, or you could be having them focus on one specific paragraph, one specific aspect, or something like that. So it could be the main idea of the text, it could be a mood of the text, whatever it is that you're wanting students to focus on as they create their poem. Then the student goes through and selects different words and phrases from the text itself that help to convey that idea, evoke that mood, or whatever. So the student would literally go through and underline or circle or cut out, depending on the medium, a word here, a phrase here, a sentence here that they might want to use later in their found poem. Then, once the different words and phrases have been selected, the student collects them in one area. I say here on the slide on a separate piece of paper, but it depends. If you actually had students cut pieces of paper or cut phrases out of a piece of paper, they could put them all on the floor. If you had them write something, they could copy them on another piece of paper. Regardless, it's important at this point to get rid of all the unselected text and just have students working on the words and phrases that they have collected. Then the student manipulates that. And what I mean by manipulate is not just put it back in the same order, although in some cases that works. But a student might want to change the word order in some cases, put certain phrases in front of other certain phrases, things like that, to try to put it in the order that not only conveys the meaning that the student wants to convey, but that also can give a feeling of poetry or a mood. Now, in addition to selecting and manipulating the text, students can do other things as well. Like I've said, they can reorder the text. So the words and phrases that they choose do not have to stay in the same order that they have found in the text. They can also use other poetical devices, the main one in this case being repetition. So if there's a phrase that they like that they think really drives the point home, they can repeat it often. They can repeat it more than once. That can help sort of create a refrain or create some sort of mood and really drive a point home. Depending on you and what you allow them to do, they can also add connecting words. This is kind of teacher's discretion, but in some cases, a found poem can be enhanced and the meaning can be a lot easier if students are allowed to put small transition words such like and or but or things like that. That is completely up to you, but in the times when I have used found poetry in my own classes, I have found it easier for students to get the meaning across and not worry so much if they're allowed a little bit of liberty with adding these extra transition words. So in trying to find examples of found poetry, although I have used this device in my classes before, I have not yet done so this year. And so I was not able to show any of my own student examples. But I did look online and found some examples. And in this case, the example that I'm using first is probably the most often found example. Every time I Googled found poetry, this is the one that popped up. So I figured I would go ahead and use it because it's an excellent example of found poetry. So the original source material it's from an essay called Coming Home Again by Chang Ray Lee. And I'm going to read the excerpt for you first. From that day, my mother prepared a certain meal to welcome me home. It was always the same. Even as I rode the school shuttle bus from Exeter to Logan Airport, I could already see the exact arrangement of my mother's table. I knew that we would eat in the kitchen, the table brimming with plates. There was the kalbi, of course, broiled or grilled depending on the season, leaf lettuce to wrap the meat with, bowls of garlicky clam broth with miso and tofu and fresh spinach, shavings of cod dusted in flour and then dipped in egg wash and fried, glass noodles with onions and shiitake, scallion and hot pepper pancakes, chilled steamed shrimp, seasoned salads of bean sprouts, spinach, and white radish, crispy squares of seaweed, steamed rice with barley and red beans, homemade kimchi. It was all there, the old flavors I knew, the beautiful salt, the sweet, the excellent taste. I wish I had paid more attention. After her death, when my father and I were the only ones left in the house, drifting through the rooms like ghosts, I sometimes tried to make that meal for him. Though it was too much for two, I made each dish anyway, taking as much care as I could. But nothing turned out quite right. Not the color, not the smell. At the table, neither of us said much of anything, and we had to eat the food for days. So this excerpt of this essay deals with this writer's memories of coming home and her mother preparing this elaborate feast for them to sort of, bring her back into their culture, into their household. And these two paragraphs here sort of have two different ideas behind them. The first paragraph is really more or less just a list of some of the foods that would be prepared. And then the second paragraph is this person's reaction and thoughts and memories about not having really appreciated it at the time and now not able to go back and really experience it again. So in the example, the student who prepared the found poem decided to focus on those two ideas, and so would first of all go through and add or pull out phrases that evoke those two ideas. So in the top paragraph, excuse me, other than having a couple of introductory lines about what this was about, really dealing with the different types of food. So pulling out, my mother prepared a certain meal to welcome me home. We would eat in the kitchen. Table brimming, kalbi, leaf lettuce to wrap the meat, garlicky clam broth with miso and tofu and fresh spinach, shavings of cod, scallion and hot pepper pancakes, chilled steamed shrimp, steamed rice. And then in the second paragraph, to evoke this idea that this was something that the writer didn't appreciate at the time and now wishes she had. The old flavors I knew, the beautiful salt, the sweet, the excellent taste. I wish I had paid more attention. So once these words and phrases are taken, everything is away, and this is what you are left with. Now, like I said, you can, at this point, the student can manipulate things, put them in different orders, add connecting words or phrases, come up with a refrain, and have something repeat over and over and over again. But that's not always the case, and this particular one works very well if you just keep these phrases and put them in pretty much the same order. And so the student's finished found poem, in this case, for this example, my mother prepared a certain meal to welcome me home. We would eat in the kitchen, table brimming, kalbi, leaf lettuce to wrap the meat, garlicky clam broth with miso and tofu and fresh spinach, shavings of cod, scallion and pepper pancakes, chilled steamed shrimp, steamed rice, the old flavors I knew, beautiful salt, sweet, excellent. I wish I had paid more attention. So you still have all the ideas from the original text, but it's been synthesized and distilled into this very short poem that I think very lovingly and beautifully expresses the same ideas, just in a different way. So one of the good things about found poetry is that this is a strategy that can be adapted to a lot of different audiences. First of all, it can be adapted to just about any grade level, and that's done simply by adjusting the difficulty of the source material. So younger grade levels, if you give them an easy text, you can still apply all the other reading strategies to this text, but they don't have to worry. They don't have to be drawing it from a complex article or something like that, is what I'm saying. In addition, as the teacher, you have the ability to provide more or less support depending on what you think the students need. So you can guide them through the text or have them try to read it on their own. In addition, you can also provide more or less guidance in the actual process of creating the poem. In some classes, you're probably able to give the instructions once or twice, and then they can work on their own. In some classes, and some students, you might need to kind of walk them through step by step and show them what to do next. So older students then can benefit from this adaptability by giving them more difficult texts. You can give them more leeway with what they can do to create more complex poems. You can start to add in the ideas, like I said before, about having not just one text, but 2 or 3 or 4 texts that they have to draw ideas from and synthesize together into one unified whole. This strategy is also excellent for different content areas. Really, any content area that requires reading, it's really easy to do this found poetry strategy with. And to prove that, I have a couple of different examples. This first one I'm going to show you is from a social studies found poem, where somebody actually created one from the Independence. And you can see it's pretty short. It's called When It Becomes Necessary. When it becomes necessary to dissolve political bands and to assume powers of the earth, the laws of nature and God entitle, and a decent respect requires, they should declare separation. Lines taken right from the Declaration of Independence, obviously not talking about the entire document, but just one small section. This next one I'm going to show you is an example from Science. This was taken from an article describing the characteristics of an exoplanet, which is a planet not in our solar system that they had found and done some tests on. And it was a scientific article about its makeup and composition and things like that, and somebody created this found poem based on it. It's called HD 189733b. Doppelganger, 63 light years away, reminiscent of Earth, deep cobalt blue. Giant gaseous planet, one side dark and interesting, one side always illuminated by its star 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, howling 45-mile-per-hour winds non-stop. Tiny silicate particles get blown sideways. What sort of umbrella do you need for raining glass? Now, that last line was actually taken from that article, in case you're wondering if that was the student sort of adding something, but it was taken from the article. So this entire article, or this entire poem, was still taken from a found poem. So as you can see, this particular strategy can be adapted to younger students, older students, science, social studies, language arts classes, math, art, any class where you have a text students read. You could employ this as a strategy afterwards to help students understand, demonstrate that understanding, synthesize ideas, and boil a text down to sort of its basic parts and its what makes it most important. All right, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.